step, since laws in most states, including Georgia, prohibit attempts to influence or intimidate jurors. The sheriff was charged and convicted of contempt of court and obstruction of the grand jury. But the Supreme Court, in a decision written by Justice Brennan, reversed. The court held that the First Amendment protected an elected public official's speech because the voting controversy directly affected the sheriff's political career. G29. The petitioner was an elected official and had, read with me, please, everybody. The petitioner was an elected official and had the right to enter the field of political controversy, particularly where his political life was at stake. The role that elected officials play in our society makes it all the more imperative that they be allowed freely to express themselves on matters of current public importance. Would thus stands for the proposition that a difference of political opinion expressed in a speech on an issue of voting irregularity cannot be punishable where all that was done was to encourage investigation and peaceful political speech. Just like Mr. Trump has done here. The legal scholars call that directly on point. A second case, Bond versus Floyd, involved a state legislature punishing an elected official for protected political speech. Bond is particularly instructive here too. In Bond, the Supreme Court squarely addressed the question of an elected official's punishment by a legislature for statements alleged to have incited public violation of the law, the burning of draft cards. The court unequivocally rejected the idea, advanced here by the House managers, that an elected official is entitled to no protection under the First Amendment. The Supreme Court held that the Georgia House of Representatives was in fact forbidden by the First Amendment from punishing Bond, by not seating him, for advocating against the policy of the United States. There are three fundamental holdings in Bond. One, the manifest function of the First Amendment in a representative government requires that legislators be given the widest latitude to express their views on issues of policy. Two, just as erroneous statements must be protected to give freedom of expression the breathing space it needs to survive, so statements criticizing public policy and the implementation of it must be similarly protected. Third holding, legislators have an obligation to take positions on controversial political questions so that their constituents can be fully informed by them and be better able to assess their qualifications. Please read along with me. Their qualifications for office. Also, so they may be represented in governmental debates by the person they have elected to represent them. Mr. Trump enjoys this same First Amendment protection from Congress. The First Amendment's protections guarantee free speech addressing the electoral integrity issues essential to his career that Mr. Trump has consistently advocated. The House managers argue that the First Amendment, and I quote, does not shield public officials who occupy sensitive policy-making positions from adverse actions when their speech undermines important governmental interests. That is flat wrong. They are, in essence, attempting to treat Mr. Trump as their employee. This is not the law under Wood and Bond. Mr. Trump was elected by the people. He is an elected official. The Supreme Court says elected officials must have the right to freely engage in public speech. Indeed, the Supreme Court expressly rejected the House manager's argument in Wood versus Georgia, holding that the sheriff was not a civil servant, but an elected official who had core First Amendment rights which could not be restricted. That's Wood v. Georgia, page 395, footnote 21. The House managers do not mention Wood or Bond in the trial brief or anywhere else. Why? Why not? Because it does not fit their narrative or their story. They want to punish Mr. Trump for engaging in constitutionally protected free speech, and they do not want you to consider the issue. But you must. Question 2. Does Mr. Trump's speech deserve protection under the First Amendment? There is no doubt Mr. Trump engaged in constitutionally protected political speech that the House has improperly characterized as incitement of insurrection. The fatal flaw of the House's argument is that it seeks to mete out governmental punishment, impeachment, based on First Amendment political speech. Speech for political purposes is the kind of activity to which the First Amendment offers its strongest protection. These are bedrock principles recognized by our Supreme Court for decades. The court has stated in no uncertain terms the importance of these principles to our democratic principles. The general proposition that freedom of expression upon public questions is secured by the First Amendment has long been settled by our decisions. The constitutional safeguard, we have said, was fashioned to assure unfettered interchange of ideas for the bringing about of political and social changes desired by the people. New York Times v. Sullivan. Our First Amendment decisions have created a rough hierarchy in the constitutional protection of speech. Core political speeches occupy the highest, most protected position. Even political speech that may incite unlawful conduct is protected from the reach of government punishment. The court has said every idea is an incitement, and if speech may be suppressed when it might inspire someone to act unlawfully, then there is no limit to the state's censorial power. The government may not prohibit speech because it increases the chances of an unlawful act will be committed at some indefinite time in the future. The House managers showed you a series of tweets going all the way back to 2015 in an effort to prove incitement. All of that evidence is totally irrelevant under the constitutional definition of incitement. Brandenburg versus Ohio is really the landmark case on the issue of incitement speech. Half of the case was mentioned yesterday. In the Brandenburg v. Ohio case, another landmark, the court held the government may only suppress speech for advocating the use of force or a violation of law if such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. The Brandenburg holding has been interpreted as having three basic prongs to determine if speech meet the definition of incitement. The Brandenburg Test precludes speech from being sanctioned as incitement to a riot unless the speech explicitly or implicitly encouraged use of violence or lawless action. 2, the speaker intends that his speech will result in use of violence or lawless action. And 3, the imminent use of violence or lawless action is the likely result of the speech. The House managers cannot get past the first prong of the Brandenburg Test. They have not and cannot prove Mr. Trump explicitly or implicitly encouraged use of violence or lawless action, period. Brandenburg requires a close examination of the words themselves. The words are either important or they're not. The House managers admitted that the incitement issue is not about the words. Why not? Because on the face of it, Mr. Trump's words are no different than the figurative speech used by every one of the senators assembled here today. If it is not about the words, but about the big lie of a stolen election, then why isn't House Manager Raskin guilty since he tried to overturn the 2016 election? The more the House managers speak, the more hypocrisy gets revealed. Hypocrisy. Even though they say it's not about the words, the law under Brandenburg requires a close analysis of the words to determine incitement. So we need to look at those words. Mr. Trump did the opposite of advocating for lawless action. The opposite. He expressly advocated for peaceful action at the Save America rally. He explicitly stated, these are the words: I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. To peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. That is how this president has spoken for years when he condemns violence, lawlessness, and rioters. The House managers have played manipulated, selectively edited parts of Mr. Trump's speech. They focus heavily on the word fight. The president used the word fight 20 times in his speech. They picked only 2. Why? Why not the other 18? Because they don't tell the story the way they want to tell it. Here are all of them. Listen to the context.
And Rudy, you did a great job. He's got guts. You know what? He's got guts. Unlike a lot of people in the Republican Party, he's got guts. He fights. He fights. And I'll tell you, thank you very much, John. Fantastic job. I watched. That's a tough act to follow, those two. There's so many weak Republicans, and we have great ones. Jim Jordan and some of these guys, they're out there fighting. The House guys are fighting. But it's incredible. Many of the Republicans, I helped them get in. I helped them get elected. Get rid of, how do you say, I want to get rid of America first? Even if you're going to do it, don't talk about it, right? Unbelievable what we have to go through. What we have to go through, and you have to get your people to fight. And if they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them. We're gonna let you know who they are. I can already tell you, frankly. Republicans are constantly fighting like a boxer with his hands tied behind his back. It's like a boxer. And we want to be so nice. We want to be so respectful of everybody, including bad people. And we're going to have to fight much harder. And Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country. because you're sworn to uphold our Constitution. And the accountability says, if we see somebody in there that doesn't treat our vets well, or they steal, they rob, they do things badly, we say, Joe, you're fired, get out of here. Before you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that before. So we've taken care of things, we've done things like nobody's ever thought possible. And that's part of the reason that many people don't like us, because we've done too much. But we've done it quickly, and we were going to sit home and watch a big victory, and everybody had us down for a victory. It was going to be great. And now we're out here fighting. I said to somebody I was going to take a few days and relax after our big electoral victory. 10 o'clock, it was over. The American people do not believe the corrupt fake news anymore. They have ruined their reputation. But you know, it used to be that they'd argue with me, I'd fight. So I'd fight, they'd fight, I'd fight, they'd fight, boop, boop. You'd believe me, you'd believe them. Somebody comes out, you know, they had their point of view, I had my point of view. But you'd have an argument. Now what they do is they go silent. It's called suppression. And that's what happens in a communist country. That's what they do. They suppress. You don't fight with them anymore unless it's a bad story. If they have a little bad story about me, they make it 10 times worse and it's a major headline. But Hunter Biden, they don't talk about him. What happened to Hunter? Where's Hunter? With your help over the last 4 years, we built the greatest political movement in the history of our country, and nobody even challenges that. I say that over and over, and I never get challenged by the fake news, and they challenge almost everything we say. But our fight against the big donors, big media, big tech, and others is just getting started. This is the greatest in history. There's never been a movement like that. Our brightest days are before us. Our greatest achievements still wait. I think one of our great achievements will be election security, because nobody until I came along had any idea how corrupt our elections were. And again, most people would stand there at 9 o'clock in the evening and say, I want to thank you very much. And they go off to some other life. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Our exciting adventures and boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, and for our beloved country. And I say this, despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come.
A boxer fighting with his hand tied behind his back, members of Congress fighting, Rudy being Rudy. These are the metaphorical, rhetorical uses of the word fight. We all know that, right? Suddenly the word fight is off limits? Spare us the hypocrisy and false indignation. It's a term used over and over and over again by politicians on both sides of the aisle. And of course, the Democrat House managers know that the word fight has been used figuratively in political speech forever. But don't take it from me. It's best to listen to them.
Our mission is to fight.
Our job is to fight.
We are in a fight. We are in a fight. We are in a fight.
Democrats are fighting as hard as we can.
Democrats are standing up to fight.
We know how to fight. We like a good fight.
Democrats are going to fight like hell.
We fight like hell.
I'm gonna fight like hell. I will fight like hell.
We're going to fight like hell.
I'm gonna fight like hell. Fight like hell.
I will fight like hell. We have to fight like hell.
I, and I know many other senators and members of the House, will fight like hell.
We are gonna fight like hell.
We're gonna fight like hell.
Fight like hell.
And we just have to fight.
We're gonna fight. We are gonna fight. We're gonna fight. We're gonna fight.
Because you will fight.
To fight.
Political revolution. That means that millions have got to stand up and fight.
And fight and fight.
Stand up and fight back.
To fight and continue.
continue to fight once again, to fight back in the fight.
We're fighting back.
My fight to fight an administration.
You don't get what you don't fight for.
We'll also fight him and challenge him in every way that we can.
Fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets.
In the Congress, in the courts, and in the streets.
There's the fight, there's the fight, there's the fight, and then there's the fight to defend.
We're eager to take on this fight.
The American people are going to have to fight.
Get in this fight.
Get in this fight.
Around the clock fighting. We gotta keep fighting and keep focused.
We will fight when we must fight. We've been fighting, so we need to fight, but we also need to fight.
It's always going to be an uphill fight.
This is going to be a fight.
We always must fight.
We're in the fight of our lives.
And we're going to be in for the fight of our lives.
This is the fight of our life.
The fight of their lives.
We are in this fight for our lives.
We cannot ever give up fighting.
Hypocrisy. The reality is Mr. Trump was not in any way, shape, or form instructing these people to fight or to use physical violence. What he was instructing them to do was to challenge their opponents in primary elections, to push for sweeping election reforms, to hold big tech responsible, all customary and legal ways to petition your government for redress of grievances, which of course is also protected constitutional speech. But the House managers don't want you to focus on those things because, again, it does not fit their story.
And you're watching day 4 of the impeachment trial against former President Donald Trump. Today, the defense is getting their chance to present their argument after a long week of hearing from Democrats. But now let's head out to just outside there at the Capitol, where our very own Ben Bergquam is standing by. Ben, what can you tell us about what you're seeing out there during this impeachment trial?
Well, I've been watching it along with all of our viewers and the American people, and I have to say that the President Trump's attorneys are eviscerating what the Democrats did. They spent 2 days building this case, basically creating a Hollywood performance, and today we've just seen that dismantled. In fact, if anybody should be held accountable for incitement, clearly the words of the left over the last 4 years rise much higher than President Trump's words do. But on the ground here, it is still very quiet. You know, speaking to folks, we're hearing the same thing. Trump supporters, a lot of them are just afraid to come to Washington, D.C. anymore. The whole city just feels like it's on lockdown. And I think, you know, talking to business owners too, they're just ready to get back to work. They're ready to get their lives back. They're tired of the political games. And we're just seeing more of that. And I think that's partly why President Trump's attorneys say it's going to be a short speech on their end. It's going to be a short rebuttal. They don't need to take all 16 hours because they've already proved it. I mean, they've spent 2 hours and said more than the Democrats spent 15 hours saying over the last 2 days.
All right, well, thank you, Ben. It looks cold out there. Stay warm. And remember to keep it here. We'll be back with more impeachment after the break. For uninterrupted coverage of the trial, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice News. We'll be right back.